Right now, criminal justice attorney Vikas Bajaj joins us with more on Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing. And Vic, I mean, these things continue to degrade, these hearings. Started with Neil Gorsuch, and you can go back many other justices as they were going through. Maybe they should have all just done what Ruth Bader Ginsburg did, and not answer any questions and just say, you know, go ahead, do you vote for me or not?
But what are you going to do in this position if you're Brett Kavanaugh? If you assert some silence and say, I'm going to give you the one-word answers, well, then you are obstructing the system and you are holding back potentially relevant information. You know, rather than it being a confirmation hearing, and I have to tell you, my wife and I had some fresh popcorn, and we were waiting on day one to figure out whether Justice Kavanaugh is an originalist, is a person who will change the text of the law or not follow precedent, which is established law in our country. But, you know, I was almost through that entire bowl, and I couldn't figure it out. Why? Wow. Because those questions weren't asked. The questions that are asked are loaded questions that really have no call for an answer. What we have, unfortunately, is a lot of showboating. It's disheartening, to tell you the truth, because we like, as civic leaders and people who enjoy the civic process, we like to know who our justices are, who's making the most important decisions for our country. Unfortunately, what we know now is who may be the biggest showboater for the 2020 elections, but very little about who will be the soon-to-be Justice Kavanaugh.
Well, there have been some interesting questions and answers. Among them, I think, when you talk about precedent, when asked about Roe versus Wade, he said there's precedent upon precedent. And when he said whether he is loyal to the president or loyal to something else, he says, I'm loyal to the Constitution. What did that tell you about him?
Well, that tells you that he is a person who will interpret the Constitution as it is supposed to be interpreted and drafted by the originalist framers of our Constitution. What it means is he will not follow the law just because it is the current state or the opinion of the Supreme Court of the United States. He will interpret the Constitution. If his interpretation of the Constitution comes to a different conclusion that perhaps other conservative justices have come to, what he is announcing is his strict adherence to do what he believes to be the right thing, and that is to adhere to the original text of the Constitution. Now, the point you bring up about that is another example of misinterpreting what he actually said. In an email that was released, and that was, I believe, from 2003, in that email, he said the law is the law and precedent is precedent, but I cannot say that precedent is etched in stone. Now, that has been interpreted by mostly the left to say, well, he's going to do away with Roe versus Wade, when in fact his opinions that he's expressed while on the bench and in opinion editorial ads and proliferations are quite the contrary.
Why? I mean, the question is, why this always comes up at every hearing.
Yes.
Whenever you have any kind of nomination, this issue comes up. It is set. Why would the judges ever revisit that issue? If it comes up again, I guess they would revisit it. But as we look live here at the hearings, there you see Senator Orange Hatching, Senator Feinstein and Grassley in the center, the chairman of this committee. So why would they ever revisit a law such as Roe versus Wade?
Well, Roe versus Wade is settled law as far as Roe versus Wade's case is concerned. Roe versus Wade is not a hammer that dictates the future of cases that may have something to do with a woman's right to choose and a government's potential right to curtail how that is done. There are, I believe, no less than 13 cases that Planned Parenthood nationally has identified that are making their way through the appellate process and now are ripe to potentially be taken in by this seated justice panel, which would be the 2018 to 2019 caseload. So there are cases that are ripe as far as the control or curtailing the right to seek abortion. Not the right to abortion, but the conditions upon which an individual can properly and legally seek an abortion. So that's when you will see Roe versus Wade being brought up in court, but in my opinion, it will never be overruled. It may be curtailed to the current state of the interpretation of the law.
Finally today, there'll be witnesses, people from the bar, people who know him. What's today going to be like?
It's sort of an amicus curiae day. It's sort of a friend of the, in this case, not the court, but the Senate committee. I was very happy to see that the American Bar Association, who was one of the first speakers, the president came out and said, we have given Brett Kavanaugh the highest rating possible. And these are the criteria we look at. The criteria had nothing to do with the 2020 election or any sound bites. And it brings up another very interesting point, Carlos, and that is we have a very heated election coming up in 2020. We can all say practically, without being an expert on anything, that the biggest hurdle to winning elections is money, because it's important to get the word out as to who you are as a candidate. Well, this is an opportunity for particularly two perhaps earmarked candidates for the Democratic side to have a free one-word or one-liner media catchphrase that you can bet your bottom dollar you will hear coming around the end of 2019.
Interesting to see. Vikas Bajaj, thanks so much for your appreciate your deep knowledge of this and your interpretation of what's going on down there. We'll see what happens with Judge Kavanaugh here in the next few days.
My pleasure. Thank you.